Welcome to Safe and Sound, sponsored by White Mountain Fire and Life Safety. I'm your host, Kirk Webb, and today on the show we have Chad Berlin, Fire Marshal from Pinetop Fire, and J.D. Pepper, the new fire inspector for Timber Mesa Fire and Medical. How you guys doing?
Good.
Very well.
So, first off, to kick things off, we want to kind of, welcome you to the Fire Prevention Program as the newest member of Fire Prevention with Timber Mesa. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I started with Timber Mesa. We were the first group that was hired when the departments merged. I tested and was hired in the first round of employees for the new Timber Mesa Fire. That was almost 7 years ago. I came up through the ranks as a firefighter. And I've spent the last 6 years going to my classes back to the National Fire Academy back in near DC, and training for the eventual move into the Fire Prevention Division. My background, being the firefighters, that's a young man's game. I've already retired once. So I knew that Timber Mesa at some point, with the growth of our area, the projected growth of our area, that we're gonna need a larger prevention program, and that's gonna entail investigations and code enforcement and some of those things. So that's why I started taking the training early on.
So I know a lot of your first retirement actually came from the law enforcement side. So yes. you've got a good background on that. Retired after 20-some years doing that kind of, and then you finally decided to come to the light side of the program, right?
Yeah, I wanted to see how firefighters lived.
Yeah, of course, but along with that, you also have some history. Your dad is a firefighter, and some other family members as well.
My dad retired from Tempe Fire after 34 years. My cousin Kelly Ayler was chief of fire department in northern Kentucky, right across the river from Cincinnati. So, yeah.
So I know, and I appreciate having another person to kind of help us out with things, because now this allows, because I think people have a misunderstanding of what Fire Prevention Division actually does. And poor Chad, you're kind of a lone man working in your department, right?
I am. Yeah, I mean, we do have 3 shift prevention specialists, but again, they're on shift, so I get to utilize those guys for inspections and investigations, which is very nice. But as of now, it's just me.
Right. And you've been a firefighter for how long now?
16 years in July.
Nice.
Yeah, all with Pinetop.
Yeah, and of course, part of what we do in the Fire Prevention Division is not, and I kind of am on the side of, I like the education side of things and being able to go out in the schools and work with the kids and things like that. But that's not all we do. Yeah, that's a prevention component. But what are some of the other prevention things that we do? Like, Chad, what are some main components that you're tasked with?
So the main things that we focus on, and you guys have alluded to several of them already, but inspections. And that could be occupancy inspections. It could be the issuing permits, operational and construction permitting, and then that subsequently you have to do an inspection after you issue the permit. Pub ed, which is your favorite, as we know, and then investigations. We have a hand in pre-planning and many other things, within the fire service. But those are kind of the nuts and bolts of what we do.
Right, and when we look at that, the inspection module, I know for many years up here on the mountain, there are building codes, fire codes, and they may or may not always have been followed or enforced or anything like that. So we're kind of behind the curve a little bit. But I think as a nation, it's really, I think we're not the only ones in that situation. So we got to kind of play it nice. How's it been going out doing inspections on your side?
It's been pretty interesting. Again, you're right. There's several issues as far as, on the code enforcement side. There haven't always been those businesses that operated within the fire code or the fire and life safety component of that. So our job going out as far as code enforcement is to gain compliance. It's not, we're not out there to shut your business down. We're not out here to be jackbooted thugs, so and so forth. we want our area to thrive. Look, we've got a projected growth here in this area over the next 5 to 10 years. Somewhere I read it was 50%. I'm not sure if that's the exact number, but we have to follow that fire and life safety code for the safety of our community, the people that come here and visit, the business owners, and our firefighters. More firefighters are killed every year due to structural issues on buildings if that building has a fire. It's important for us to go in and recognize those issues and work with the businesses to try to get those hazards mitigated.
Right.
Well, I was just going to echo what JD said. I think the biggest part of doing inspections is that education piece and why we're doing it. The reason we're here for fire and life safety, right? We want to protect you, your business, your patrons, our firefighters, and the community as a whole. So every business counts. So that's exactly why we do it. And we start with that education piece. And most of the time, I say 99.9% of the time, you get buy-in just from that education, explaining why we do it. So.
Right, and like you mentioned, we're not here to try to shut them down or anything like that. Because at the end of the day, the biggest thing that we're trying to accomplish is that people are safe going into these businesses. Because if something is to happen or were to happen at one of these businesses, the business owner is the one that's going to be liable.
Correct.
So we're there trying to protect them from those lawsuits. And unfortunately, we live in a litigious society.
You're absolutely right.
So it's, so I think there's a misconcept about when we're going out there. But on the other hand, we get a lot of people that call us up, hey, when are you coming to do our inspection? Or we've been there and say, hey, I got these things fixed. Can you give me a clean bill of health, basically? Mm-hmm. So it's nice to see that community involvement and people that are wanting to have us come. And I know, like you said, you have inspection specialists on each crew, mm-hmm. and we have our crews going out doing those inspections, because part of that, with them doing those inspections, because 2 o'clock in the morning when the call kicks out, we're not the ones responding.
Right.
At the beginning, the onset of this emergency. The guys need to have that basic knowledge of the business and where things are. And
yeah, and we do that's how we assign ours. I think you guys are very similar. So when they do the inspections, they also do a pre-planned component to that for those fires, early morning fires. Yeah.
So when we talk about pre-plan, that pre-plan can be very minimal, depending on the size of the business and what kind of business it is, or it can be very intricate, dealing with, like, for example, I know we got one of our guys that's on light duty that's working with one of our assisted living places. Here you got a 3-story, it's actually 2 separate buildings that are connected. 3-story, I don't know how many, I can't remember how many rooms in the whole complex. But it's, very intricate. If a fire were to kick out in this building, can you imagine everything that has to take place, evacuations and along with fighting the fire? So it's beneficial for us. It's beneficial for our firefighters. It's also beneficial with the residents, and working together and doing practice fire drills with them and things like that. So
right, and it's another way to get out into the community and get contact hours with the public in a non-emergent situation. So it's always nice to have contact with the public when it's not a 911 call, so we can have these conversations.
Right, and all the different education we can provide to them, fire extinguisher training or whatever the case. So
yeah,
there's a lot of things that people don't realize that we're doing. A lot of it is in the background. I know Chad, you and also Brian Russell, our fire marshal, you get to see new buildings. What's it like doing a plan review?
Tedious, but I love doing plan reviews. It gives us an opportunity to tackle things on the front end of something. So we'll look at the plans and compare that to the code, and then we can send it back for revisions if we find something that's not meeting code or something they need. So really, it's a great way to make sure the building's safe in the beginning, because after all, the fire department inherits that building for the life of the building. So we want to make sure it's safe, right? And secondly, it's a good way to catch things before it's built, and which would save the builder and the business owner money, right? If we catch it in the plan review. So I personally love plan review, like you love public education. It's one of my babies. So
and it's been nice to be able to kind of specialize in those areas, and and I think with having a law enforcement background kind of helps with educating people why it's important to follow the rules, I think.
It is. And I'll be honest, right now, since I've been in the fire prevention division now for about 4 months, just the businesses, the occupancies that I've gone out and spoke with, they are so willing to gain compliance. I have explained the fire and life safety component to them, and they understand that pretty much in our world that all of this stuff, all of fire prevention and fire safety begins with us.
Absolutely, yeah. And even on that prevention, one of the sayings I like to use is prevention begins with education.
Yeah,
correct.
Regardless of how or what we're doing, that education component is really huge. Mm-hmm. Whether we're working with preschool kids clear up to senior citizens, and it varies throughout whole different types of education that we've got to be familiar with and be able to explain. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about some of the other things that we do, investigations, there's times that I know some of the investigations I've been on, they can be very interesting, or they become very intense and intriguing as well too. I don't know if you guys have a favorite one you might want to share, or an interesting one.
Well, to me, they're all interesting.
They are, yeah. They're all different. So
just when you think you have a fire, figured out as to what it's done, mm-hmm. you don't. Yeah. So it's a very again, they'll use that word tedious. It's a tedious process.
Yeah. And one of the ones that I came across, and luckily it never got to a full-blown structure fire, but we had a situation one afternoon. This lady kind of smelled something in her house, and this was in the late afternoon, and then it went away. The very next, and she almost called 911, but the smell went away. The next day, same time in the afternoon, started, and this time she could see a haze in her home. And she thought it smelled like electrical. And so we're there. So she calls 911. They show up. And this was like right around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I was headed home, happened to be on my way home. So I thought, I'm going to stop in here and hang out with the guys and kind of check things out. And what it was where the sunlight was going through the bathroom window, which was a regular open, glass, not the frosted glass. So clear glass. And she had a convex, those makeup mirrors with the convex, and it just happened to be focused just right. So going through the glass, shining back onto the framework of the window, and you could see where there's a little itty bitty tiny pinhole and smoke going up from there. And one of the guys on the inside had to talk to me, and I was outside at the moment, and had to move that mirror, and that's when we found it. So one of the guys, had that been a full-blown, there's no way we would have been able to find that as a source. No. And I know just recently, you actually were the guy in charge of creating a training with law enforcement on, how'd that go?
I thought it really went well.
It was outstanding. Yeah.
So give me a little synopsis of what we did there on that training.
So, arson is one of those crimes that's hard to prove, but it's not impossible. Fortunately, I was able to go and be trained by the ATF on fire and explosives investigations, and it was a wonderfully prepared and in-depth course taught by, in my opinion, the very best at what they do. These folks there at the National Fire Academy, I can't say enough about them. Yeah. So knowing that, we have in our area, we have various law enforcement agencies that we work with just within our respective districts. We have Navajo County Sheriff's Office, Show Low Police Department, and Pinetop Lakes PD. And if we have a fire that we determine is an arson, we don't have a color of authority for arrest or any of those typical powers that a police officer would have through Arizona Post and the state, so on and so forth. we have the authority to conduct the investigation. Once we determine that there's a crime involved, then we would hand that over to law enforcement. Law enforcement in our area, very capable, but fire is just one of those realms where you've really got to be focused on it. And what we're trying to do is to develop that relationship with our law enforcement partners. So when we do have an arson, a crime, that we can hand that case to the detective that responds out there. They have been trained in what we are trained in. They understand the terminology, what the dynamics that they're seeing, what we're presenting to them, and they can go on and make contact with if there's a suspect in the case, they would make contact and start that interview process, start the evidence.
The chain of custody.
The chain of custody on the evidence, and make sure that the labs are looking at those things and determining whether there was accelerants used, or if this was an electrical fire, or however somebody may have started that fire. Again, it's a very tedious process, layering through all that stuff. So the training that we put on this last week was a staged burn at Timber Mesa Fire Medical at our admin site. We have a small Connex that we used. We built up the inside. Using sheetrock and furniture, like a small room and contents fire. We burned it the day before and put it out before it flashed. And we invited the law enforcement area partners to come over. It was raining and snowing that day.
It was real life.
It was a real life, just like you would on a regular scene. We can't control Mother Nature, but they came out, and I was very impressed. Which I would have been anyways, but we had some. The detectives out there were very, very astute, and they were paying attention, and they really wanted to get in there and find out what the cause was. And when the detective, one of the senior detectives, started that interview process, that questioning, that's where you really start finding out certain things.
Right, and being there and watching, because you became the suspect at that point.
I did.
And so he's interviewing you, and I'm like, this is awesome, because I am not that kind of person to be able to interview like that. And so we learned how to be more cohesive together. And learn each other's strengths and working, because some of these guys we've worked with for years, and we've been on different fires and things, but like you're right, learning to understand our language that we speak and their language. Of course, you've got a kind of a little bit of a up on the rest of us, to where you came from law enforcement side. So
I'm bilingual.
Yeah, you're already there. So it was really, in our opinion, I think it was great to have you as that instructor,
Agreed.
The main instructor, and then we were there as backup as they're going through the process. We filmed it. So they didn't see the actual burning process, other than at the end of the class we showed it to them, and it was nice to be able to hear their remarks. And in fact, I know some of the comments were, how come more law enforcement guys didn't show up to this class? So I think getting that, and we're going to keep going.
I think we are. I think we have fostered a very good, on this side, the investigations side. We've fostered a very good working relationship. I know with Navajo County Sheriff's Office. I know that the sheriff, David Klaus, and the chief deputy over there, Brian Swanee, have been very instrumental in getting their folks over to our training. We were, however, by the way, if I might, we were able to offer continuing officer education to the officers. Timber Mesa Fire Medical is now a third-party vendor for Arizona Post for fire investigations, and we conduct this training quarterly.
Which is huge, because they're always looking for those certified training opportunities. And
the officers have to get 20 hours of continuing education every year to maintain their certification. Up here in our area, it's hard to do. Number one, because agencies are small, they don't have the budget to send officers, all of their officers, to get this training. So you have to do training in-house. If we're able to provide, and this training was 8 hours, which was a pretty large chunk of that 20 hours. If we're able to provide that training on the investigation side of fires, and their detectives can get continuing officer education, and it doesn't cost their departments anything, I think it's a win-win for our department, theirs, and the community as well.
Absolutely.
The whole region, yeah.
And one of the other things that because there's a lot of areas that are in the county that no fire district actually covers that area.
Correct.
So with this training that they've received now, let's say they get a fire outside of those district boundaries, they can actually have a better understanding of what to look for, what to not destroy, when to call us in for assistance, because we can respond outside of our jurisdictional boundaries.
Yes, we can, and we do.
Exactly, and even on over to Apache County. We've gone to a few fires that way.
I assisted Heber Overguard just a few weeks ago. They had a fire that started out there. They didn't have an investigator at the time, and they were able to call us, and we responded over there to conduct that investigation.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that we do with our investigations is, because somebody's got to take nights and weekends.
Yeah.
How does that work out for you, Chad? I mean,
I think it works great the way Timber and Pinetop are currently doing. So we share resources, essentially. So there's 4 of us all together, and we take turns with nights and weekends on an on-call basis, and it's a good system. So it allows us to work with other districts. Again, it gives the community resources. Like JD mentioned, we've been to Heber, we've been as far as Holbrook, been to tribal lands. So we get called. If there's an investigator need, we go.
Right, so. And especially with if you were having to do every night and weekend on your own.
By myself? Yeah. And, I'm grateful for you guys.
Yeah, and even with us, it's nice to be able to, rotate that around, and gives us the ability to be gone for a while and not. Now, granted, there's times that we may need all of us to show up on a big
Sure.
fire, and that happens, and
we do.
But it allows us that flexibility to be more free with our time. Because I know you guys kind of like to go hunting.
A little bit.
But and then this time of year, one of the other big things that we're doing is we're dealing with forest fires. And in fact, usually, typically it seems like we're going into fire restrictions towards the end or first of May, first part of June. This year, unfortunately, I think we're going to be in fire restrictions much sooner. In fact, they're already scheduled to start the first week of May. So when we're talking about stage 1 fire restrictions, what does that mean?
So we'll start with campfires. So that's going to mean campfires in designated areas only. So you can have a warming, a cooking, fire at your home, but it's got to have 3 foot of combustible clearance. Clear of the combustibles 3 feet away. So campfires only in designated areas. And then smoking, same thing, only in designated areas. So that could be within a building, if it's allowed, like your house, a car, or a designated smoking area.
Right, same thing. That's got to be cleared out. And not only this way, but I think sometimes people forget that
100%.
Heat rises, and you got to make sure there's no branches above your fire too.
Right.
So we're not telling people to not have fun and not enjoy outdoors and things like that. And the thing that's been nice is we do this as a whole entire county. The Forest Service included, and tribal lands and things like that. So we go into these restrictions typically together, so there's not confusion.
Yeah, it's a coordinated event. So there's a group that meets every week, and then they have certain criteria it has to meet to go into restrictions. So it does several things. It keeps everybody on the same page, which avoids public confusion. So we're all saying the same things at the same time, which is very important.
I know, because years ago when I was on the department to begin with, and I was taking those phone calls. Why? Because there was a campground the Forest Service used to manage right in the middle of town,
Yeah.
and they were allowing them to have fires and recreational fires, and we weren't as a fire district. And why can they have one? It's like, well, that's the way. So we've gotten past that, and doing it together makes it so much nicer.
It does.
On all levels. And in fact, when we define a campfire, it's 3 foot around and 2 foot. So we don't allow bonfires.
Right.
And debris burning. We kind of shut that off at this point.
We do.
And so you'll see posted on our website and our number that we call for debris burning. So we don't cancel people's permits, but we don't do any debris burning during the day.
Suspended for now. Yeah,
Right.
Typically July it would reopen if we get our monsoonal flows. 3 other just points with the stage 1. So no tracer ammunition. no exploding targets, and no consumer fireworks. So
yeah, in fact, I think a lot of people forget that on federal lands, state lands, it's never okay to do any fireworks ever.
Yeah.
So, and trust me, they look out for that. I know, working with our Forest Service folks, they send people out on patrols. Whenever we have a red flag day, you know, I mean, how many times have you gone out beyond extra duty, you know, sign up for overtime shifts, because we actually put one of our Type 6s out on that patrol as well too.
So our suppression module that we have with the Pinetop Fire District, they're actually going doing severity patrol, with the Forest Service starting now until the monsoons happen. So a lot of those pre-positioned things are already happening. So
yeah, and you know, we get crews coming from out of state that come in and are staging in our area. I believe there's one already positioned in our local region right now. So there's, you know, so they, you know, the Forest Service, federal, they look at all those components, that, you know, things that you talked about, the ERGs, the energy release components, the weather, what it's projected, and all that.
Right.
And so there's a whole lot of things that take into place why we go into restrictions, when we go into restrictions, and then what do we have available if we do get that big fire.
All factors.
So, and if you're the praying type, I guess that doesn't hurt either. So I want to thank you guys for coming on the show today. I appreciate what you guys do. I'm glad that I have a good group of guys to work with, and hopefully we can continue this partnership and create even bigger ones, and keep moving forward with what we're doing.
Same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you too.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Safe and Sound. Join us for the next edition.